Hey everyone, welcome back to the REBT series where we're going through the exercises in the book. There's only about 1 or 2 left. Today is exercise 17, which is about REI, rational emotive imagery. I didn't use this per se with my direct fears, which sounds different, but I did use this in other areas of my life that weren't where my OC was completely latched. Before I go any further, please subscribe, hit that like button down below. Please come in, don't sit in silence. We can help you. Phil at OCDrecovery.com. And like I said, we work all over the world in all different time zones. Okay, so use rational emotive imagery to get over any emotional upsetness that you may have about falling back to a previous level of disturbance, or to use it for almost any other problem of anxiety, depression, or rage that you might have. So maybe you're going through a relapse right now. Think about the last time you had a relapse. Think about how you learned to change your beliefs during that time. Help yourself get out of that. Think about how it wasn't the end of the world. Yes, it sucked. Yes, it wasn't optimal. I don't use that word optimal. There's certain words I don't use in my vocabulary because I think the cons are way more than the pros. I don't say the word trauma. It's not that I don't believe in it. I just don't see a point in it because the way people say it's problematic. I don't use the word optimal because optimal doesn't exist. Just other phrases like that. I don't say stuff like, you could do whatever you want to do. That's not true at all. So I don't use these kind of like wishy-washy terms that a lot of society, again, it's not discrediting for things you've gone through in your life. It's just, okay, you went through that. Now you have to work on it in a grieving process, allowing all the discomfort to be there while you change your beliefs and your behaviors. It's the only thing you can do, regardless of the severity of what's happened to you. And we've all been through really tough things as OCD sufferers. So, and using rational emotive imagery, you first imagine one of the worst things that could happen to you. So think about it right now. Let's say you're really anxious right now. Think about what your life would look like for the rest of your life with these symptoms. Irritability probably, maybe a lot more panic attacks. You wouldn't be able to be calm in certain situations or many situations, etc. For example, you worked very hard to overcome your fear of public speaking or to overcome your addiction to cigarettes. And now you've fallen back again, and in fact, have a worse fear you have ever had, or smoking even more cigarettes you did before. So this is what happens to a lot of people when they fall back. They go from, I used an example yesterday. How do I say this? Okay, so let's say you have 10, just an easy scale of 10 relapses over a 3-year period, bad ones. And they progressively get worse, right? Because it's always trying to bring you back whatever it can with its grips to get you back into the OCD cycle. So relapse severity number 2 will feel horrible at the time, the worst thing ever, because it's worse than number 1. But relapse 5, you'll look back at relapse 2 and be like, that was nothing compared to this one. And then relapse 10 makes 1 through 9 look like child's play. So it tends to do this because it wants to pull you back into the OCD cycle. So you've let yourself feel anxious, depressed, or self-hating about how you've just fallen back after previously working hard and effectively using REBT to overcome your fear of addiction. Let us suppose that as you vividly imagine the worst possible thing happening, you feel exceptionally ashamed, guilty, self-downing about your allowing yourself to fall back. So adult websites, this is a big one for me. Smoking the Juul pod and other vapes is a big one for me. Cheating was a big one for me. Video games is a big one for me. These are like outward behaviors I kept falling back to because my beliefs were really rigid, plus the behaviors had been there for a while. One of my favorite things to say, which is really funny, I think society has this backwards, and I did get this from Jordan Peterson. It's not something I came up with. You know, he said something like, people always say, I can't believe that person would cheat on their wife. He didn't use that example. It was more like yelling at someone. I can't believe someone would yell at someone, or I can't believe someone would cheat on their wife. And he says, we're asking the wrong question. The right question is, in my house, how I see it, is how can someone that has options in life, if you're a good-looking person, not everyone is good-looking. I'm not tall, and I wasn't born into millions and millions of dollars. There's people I know who aren't the most physically attractive, but their families are worth 10, 20, 30 million dollars. So there's pros and cons and all over the place. But the real question is, how can someone who has options learn to stay faithful and monogamous? That takes a lot more self-control. If you're a good-looking person, you have options, no wonder why you want to sleep around, because it's never been hard for you, right? It's like, imagine playing basketball. Not saying you have to work hard and all the practice, but if basketball comes a little bit easier to you and you make it to the NBA and you make $35 million a year, well, why would you not do that even if you don't enjoy it per se all the time? A great example of this was Matt Frazier, 5-time CrossFit Games Olympic champion. I don't think he really enjoyed CrossFit to the level that some of the other people did. He just was a fucking beast He was so good. I've heard him kind of hint at this. Now, I'm pretty sure he admitted this at times. He just was so good at it, and it made no sense for him to not do it because he knew 4-year, 6-year career, he would set himself up with millions of dollars and branding for the rest of his life. So it's just the reality of these things. We look at things in society as very, very black and white. Okay, so on the contrary, make yourself really think about this until you really feel it. So right now, I'm thinking about having full anxiety for the rest of my life. I wish I could just like bring it on fully right now, like fully. Yeah, I didn't sleep well for years. Stomach was fucked up, constantly bloating, constantly farting, irritability with my wife. Everything would bother me. Sounds are heightened. Like Daisy's right here snoring. Just looked at me. She's snoring on the side. That's why I have to talk a little bit louder. Miss Daisy. I'll show her at the end. So things like that would drive me crazy. I always laugh now when I hear people, can you please close your mouth and the chewing stuff? And I just think to myself, gosh, I'm so lucky I went through OCD recovery because all these little things that bother people do nothing to me because we had a lot more discomfort than that. So when you actually really felt the disturbed emotion for a while, push yourself to change this feeling in your gut. Now, obviously, this doesn't work in a 1-to-1 ratio with OCD. It's going to take time. So instead, you only experience a healthy but still strong feeling. Thus, make yourself feel keenly disappointed, regretful, annoyed, irritated with your behavior, for you have done a wrong self-defeating thing by letting yourself fall back. So every time I eat eggs with hot sauce right before I come on the call, it never ends well. I'm like talking so fast, it's like still in my stomach and like coming up through my esophagus. Dumb. So, and then chugging a coffee on top of that. Duh. So think about all the things you could still do if you suffered for the rest of your life. Now, I know some of you are thinking, I hear every day, everyone thinks they're the worst, but let's say you have severe POCD or sexual fears or harm or false memorial event. The reality is a lot of your life would suck, but a lot of your life would be good. You could still do things if you force yourself to do it, and I can't teach you to cultivate that. This is why REI is really important. Another way I used REI was thinking about, I love history. One of the books I'm reading right now. It's called On Killing. This is a famous photo. If I believe correctly, I think this individual died a month after he took this photo. From the page Revive History I followed, and then another historical leaks. So I like reading books like this. So this book is about how, I didn't know this in World War I. This is how I use REI. In World War I and World War II, only 15 to 20% of people wanted to kill. Because they had face-to-face taking of someone's life. They didn't really have what they call psychological casualties, PTSD, shame, guilt, when it was from afar, artillery strikes, and even when they were dropping bombs on houses because they couldn't see the life leaving the person's eyes. And there's a lot of, like here's one. I'll read you. I have it right here. Okay. It didn't hit me all that much, but when I think of it now, I slaughtered people and I murdered them. German World War II veteran. So this is killing Americans. Or Russians or Ukrainians. This was the first time I had killed anybody, and when things quieted, I went and looked at the German I knew I shot, and remember thinking he was old enough to have a family, and I felt very sorry. That was a British World War I veteran after his first kill. This is an Israeli lieutenant. Killing is one of the worst things a man can do to another man. It's the last thing that should happen anywhere. This is a Napoleonic British soldier. I approached myself as a destroyer, and the uneasiness came over me, and I felt like a criminal. This was a Special Forces. It was a boy between the ages of 12 and 14. And when he turned to look at me, all of a sudden his whole body and pointed his automatic weapon at me. So the kid was going to kill him. I opened fire, 20 rounds, and I killed him. And I dropped my weapon. And I started to cry. So, and this has nothing to do with politics or what's happening today. This is, if you can't face the realities of life, you're not going to be able to recover from OCD. And this is what happens in life. Whoa. So, sneezing today, burping on the calls. I'm all over the place. When I look at stuff like that, I use REI to try to imagine myself in that situation, which I don't use it to make myself feel better, but I think about that nothing I went through, as hard as it was as bad, in my opinion, as that. If I had to be any of those people that did those actions, I would pick who I am right now and all my suffering. So I'd use it in that way, and that helped me a lot. And watching cancer documentaries and looking at people that don't have any legs, etc., people who got blown up, my wife has a patient right now. It's a really, really sad case. He never had anything wrong with him. He was a personal trainer. He was very strong and in very good shape. This is not anti-vaccine or anything, just what happened. He took the vaccine and he developed a very, very severe autoimmune condition. And he was a quadriplegic and he was paralyzed. And still to this day, he can't feel his legs. He can't use his legs. And he had no problems before the vaccine. So I think about stuff like that, and it makes you realize that there's a lot of things out there that are really tough. So thank you again. This is how I use REI. I know it was a little bit more of a down video, but I think it's important to look at stuff like that. Phil at OCDrecovery.com. Hope to hear from you soon. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.